There are secrets in this world that should remain hidden. Artifacts that carry whispers from realms beyond our understanding. I never believed in such things until that night at the Metropolitan Museum of Eastern Antiquities. Now I can't escape the whispers. They follow me everywhere. His name: Pazuzu. Welcome to the Obscuralore Vault. My name is Marcus Reed, and tonight I'm going to share with you how my life changed forever after breaking into a museum basement. But before we begin this journey into darkness, make sure you're comfortable, or perhaps uncomfortable is better for what you're about to hear. Chapter 1. The Assignment. I used to be a graduate student in archaeology, specializing in ancient Mesopotamian cultures. My thesis focused on religious artifacts and their cultural significance. Professor Harlow, my advisor, was a brilliant but demanding mentor who pushed all his students to the edge of exhaustion. "Reed," he'd say, "academia is no place for the timid. If you want to make a mark, you need to discover something no one else has seen." I was desperate to impress him. 6 years into my PhD program with nothing groundbreaking to show for it. My funding was running out and the pressure was mounting. Every night I'd fall asleep surrounded by books on Sumerian and Akkadian deities, dreaming of ancient gods with animal heads and human bodies. It was during one of our department's weekly gatherings that I first heard about it. Dr. Eleanor Walsh, a visiting professor from Cambridge, mentioned a recent acquisition at the Metropolitan Museum of Eastern Antiquities. "They've received quite an impressive collection from a dig in northern Iraq," she said, sipping her wine. "Most of it is still uncatalogued, sitting in their basement storage." "Anything interesting?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Hard to say. The excavation was rushed, political tensions in the region. But rumor has it they found something in a sealed chamber beneath an ancient temple. Something that wasn't supposed to be included in the official manifest." I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced with possibilities. What if this was it? My chance to discover something truly significant? I had a friend, Mira, who worked as an assistant curator at the museum. We'd dated briefly before deciding we were better as friends. I called her the next morning. "Mira, I need a favor." "Marcus, it's 7 a.m. on a Saturday. It's important. That new Mesopotamian collection, can you get me access?" There was a long pause. "You know I can't do that. Most of it isn't even processed yet. Please, Mira. My thesis is going nowhere. I just need to see what they've got." The answer is no, Marcus. It's more than my job is worth. I should have taken her refusal as the end of it. Should have found another avenue for my research. But desperation makes fools of us all. And something else was happening. Something I couldn't explain then. Dreams of sand-swept ruins. Whispers in languages I shouldn't understand. Looking back, I think it was already calling to me. Chapter 2. The Break-In. It took me 2 weeks to plan the break-in. The museum had decent security, but like most academic institutions, it had weaknesses. Budget cuts meant fewer guards, and I knew the building better than most, having spent countless hours in their research library. Mira had mentioned that the new artifacts were being kept in Storage Room B, 3 levels below the main floor. The basement areas were accessed by service elevators and a rarely used stairwell at the east wing. I chose a Tuesday night. The museum closed early at 5:30 and had the fewest staff on duty. I stayed late in the research library, hidden in the back stacks when they did the final walkthrough. Heart pounding, I waited until the librarian locked up and left. Now alone in the darkened library, I made my way to the east stairwell. My phone's flashlight guided me down the concrete steps, each footfall echoing despite my best efforts to stay quiet. The air grew colder as I descended, carrying a musty smell of old stone and preservatives. Level B1, Administrative Offices. Level B2, Climate-Controlled Document Storage. Level B3, Artifact Storage. The third basement level was illuminated only by emergency lighting, dim red bulbs casting long shadows across the hallway. I checked the small map I'd sketched based on information Mira had inadvertently shared. Storage room B should be at the end of the corridor to the right. The door was locked, of course. I'd brought a set of lockpicks I'd purchased online. Amateur stuff, but the lock was old, a simple tumbler mechanism. It took 7 agonizing minutes of fumbling before I heard the satisfying click. The room was massive, rows upon rows of metal shelving units filled with wooden crates and acid-free boxes. Everything was labeled with catalog numbers, but nothing to indicate contents. I pulled out my phone and began systematically checking boxes that had acquisition dates matching the Iraqi collection. That's when I first felt it. A strange sensation, like being watched. The hair on my arms stood on end despite the chill. I told myself it was just nerves, the natural anxiety of doing something illegal, but deep down I knew it was something more. 3 hours into my search, I was about to give up. Then I noticed something odd, a section of shelving that didn't quite match the others. The metal was newer, and the boxes had no catalog numbers, only a red stripe across each lid. They were separated from the rest of the collection by a plastic curtain. Behind the curtain was a small table with research equipment, magnifying glasses, brushes, measuring tools, and a logbook. I flipped it open, scanning entries in a neat, precise handwriting. Item 37B, bronze amulet corroded, depicts winged figure item 38A, clay tablet, partial text, references the wind demon, item 42F, limestone idol, damaged, unusual preservation state. And then, written in different handwriting, underlined twice. Item 47X, restricted, for director's review only. My hands were shaking as I searched for box 47X. It wasn't on the shelves with the others. Something told me I should leave, complete my thesis without this mysterious artifact, graduate with honors, live a normal life. But I'd come too far. In the corner of the room stood a small safe, the kind used for particularly valuable or delicate items. It had a digital keypad. I tried several combinations, the museum's founding date, the acquisition date of the collection. Nothing worked. Then I noticed a post-it note stuck to the underside of the table, a 6-digit number. Surely not. I entered the number. The safe clicked open. Inside was a single wooden box, much older than the others. Dark wood, inlaid with mother-of-pearl in strange geometric patterns. No museum labels, no catalog numbers, just a symbol carved into the lid. Something like a human body with wings, the head replaced by what might have been a dog or a reptile. I should have closed the safe, should have walked away, but I didn't. With trembling fingers, I lifted the box and placed it on the table. The whispers started the moment I touched the lid. Chapter 3. The Discovery. The box was sealed with an ancient wax, cracked with age. I broke the seal with a small knife from the research table. The whispers grew louder, not audible exactly, but present in my mind. A language I shouldn't understand, yet somehow did. Zug Shura. Ia. Pazuzu. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in crumbling fabric, was a figurine no larger than my hand. It was carved from some dark stone. Obsidian, perhaps, though unlike any I'd seen. In the dim light, it seemed to absorb the shadows around it. The figure was humanoid, but wrong in subtle ways, its arms too long, ending in talons. Wings sprouted from its back, not angelic, but insectoid. The head was the most disturbing part, a mixture of canine and reptilian features with an expression that somehow conveyed both malevolence and invitation. I knew immediately who it was. Pazuzu, the ancient Mesopotamian demon king of the wind, bringer of famine and disease. In some texts, he was also a protector against other demons, particularly Lamashtu, who threatened women in childbirth. But this representation was different from any I'd studied. More primal, more real. Its eyes, tiny pinpricks of some reflective material, seemed to follow my movements. I reached for my phone to take pictures. The battery, which had been at 70%, was suddenly dead. The emergency lights flickered, and for a moment the room was plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, I could have sworn the figurine had moved slightly, turning toward me. A trick of the light, I told myself. I needed to document this properly. In my bag was a small notebook. I began to sketch the idol and transcribe the symbols etched into its base. The whispers continued, louder now. Zugshura, Ia, Pazuzu. I found myself whispering back, the strange syllables falling from my lips as if I'd spoken them all my life. The air in the storage room grew heavy, charged with something like electricity before a storm. That's when I noticed the temperature had dropped dramatically. My breath fogged in front of me. The walls seemed to pulse as if breathing, and the figurine, the idol of Pazuzu, began to feel warm in my hands, despite the cold. A security alarm suddenly blared, shattering the strange moment. I'd been discovered, or perhaps some motion sensor had finally registered my presence. Either way, I had minutes, maybe seconds, before security arrived. I made a decision I still can't explain. Instead of replacing the idol and fleeing, I wrapped it in my scarf and shoved it into my bag. The whispers surged as I did, becoming almost a song. I ran from the storage room, up the emergency stairs, and out through a service entrance I'd identified in my planning. The night air hit me like a physical force. It was raining, a sudden storm that hadn't been in the forecast. Lightning illuminated the museum's Gothic architecture as I ran across the campus, the bag with its forbidden cargo bumping against my hip. I made it home without being stopped. Soaked to the skin, heart racing, I locked my apartment door and sank to the floor. What had I done? I'd not only broken into a secured facility but stolen an ancient artifact, probably worth thousands if not millions. My academic career would be over if I was caught. But as I sat there, water pooling around me on the hardwood floor, I realized something even more disturbing. The whispers hadn't stopped. They'd followed me home. Chapter 4. The Research. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? With the idol of Pazuzu sitting on my desk, its obsidian surface catching the light from my lamp in ways that seemed impossible. Sometimes absorbing it completely, sometimes reflecting it in patterns across my walls. I tried to be methodical. This was research after all. I photographed the idol from every angle with my digital camera, which thankfully still worked. I measured it precisely, 7.3 inches tall, weighing approximately 1.4 pounds. The stone defied easy identification, not quite obsidian, not quite basalt. The markings on the base weren't cuneiform as I'd expected, nor any other script I recognized from my studies. They resembled no known Mesopotamian writing system, yet somehow I could understand fragments. The King of Wind awaits, the gate between worlds. The name is the key. Dawn found me surrounded by books and printouts, my laptop open to obscure archaeological journals. The rain continued outside, unusually persistent for the season. I made coffee and tried to focus my scattered thoughts. What I'd stolen wasn't just an archaeological curiosity. It was something else, something older. The official documentation from the dig site, what little I could find online, made no mention of a sealed chamber or an idol. It was as if this artifact didn't officially exist. By midday, my eyes were burning from lack of sleep, but I'd compiled enough information to be deeply disturbed. Pazuzu appeared in texts dating back to the Assyrian Empire around 700 BCE, but there were hints of a much older origin. Some scholars suggested the demon predated written history, his worship stretching back to the earliest human settlements in Mesopotamia. More troubling were the similarities across cultures. Wind demons with animal heads and human bodies appeared in mythologies worldwide, separated by thousands of miles and years, as if the same entity had been encountered independently by people who could not possibly have communicated with each other. My phone rang, startling me. It was Mira. My stomach dropped. "Marcus, are you okay? There was a break-in at the museum last night." "A break-in? That's terrible." My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. "They're saying something was taken from the basement storage, the new Iraqi collection." I tried to sound surprised. Really? What was it? They're not telling us. Dr. Chambers from Conservation is having some kind of breakdown. Keeps saying they should never have brought it here. Her voice lowered. Marcus, you didn't... Of course not, I lied. Listen, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back? After hanging up, I sat staring at the idol. The whispers had become a constant background noise like tinnitus, sometimes receding, sometimes surging forward with disturbing clarity. Zug shura, ia, Pazuzu, ia, ia. I needed to understand what I'd taken. More importantly, I needed to understand why I'd taken it. The compulsion had felt external somehow, as if the decision hadn't been entirely my own. I decided to try something. In my research, I'd come across rituals associated with Pazuzu. Most seemed like superstitious nonsense, but one appeared in multiple sources. The offering of blood to awaken the demon's power as a protector. The ancient Mesopotamians believed that Pazuzu, despite his fearsome nature, could ward off other demons, particularly Lamashtu, who brought disease and stole infants. By offering blood, they turned one evil against another. With a kitchen knife, I made a small cut on my fingertip. Just a research experiment, I told myself, a way to disprove the superstitions. The drop of blood fell onto the idol's head. The whispers stopped. Complete silence, for the first time in hours. Then the lights in my apartment went out. Chapter 5. The Transformation. I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight. The screen showed 3 missed calls from Professor Harlow. Why would he be calling me on a Wednesday? We weren't scheduled to meet until Friday. The beam from my phone illuminated the idol. The drop of blood was gone, seemingly absorbed by the stone. And the eyes, those tiny pinpricks of reflective material, were definitely glowing now. A faint reddish light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The whispers returned, but changed, clearer, as if my blood offering had established a connection. I could understand whole phrases now, not just fragments. The gate opens with the name. Speak the name with blood on your tongue. This isn't real, I said aloud. This is sleep deprivation, or some kind of toxic reaction. But even as I spoke, I knew that wasn't true. Something was happening in my apartment, something beyond scientific explanation. The air felt thick, charged with potential. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, almost liquid. My phone rang again. Professor Harlow. This time I answered. Reed? Where the hell have you been? Campus security is looking for you. What? Why? Don't play dumb. The museum break-in. They have you on camera entering the research library yesterday and never leaving. My blood ran cold. Professor, I can explain. Save it. Whatever you've done, fix it now. Dr. Chambers from the museum is having some kind of psychiatric episode. Keeps talking about a curse. The call dropped. I tried to redial, but there was no signal. Outside, the storm had intensified. Rain lashed against my windows with unnatural force. My attention returned to the idol. The glow from its eyes had intensified, casting red patterns across my desk. The whispers were changing again, consolidating into a single voice, deep, ancient, speaking directly into my mind. Say my name. Release me. I felt myself stand, though I hadn't consciously decided to do so. My body seemed to be responding to commands that bypassed my conscious mind. I picked up the idol. It was hot now, almost burning my palms, but I couldn't put it down. Pazuzu, I whispered. A sharp pain in my mouth. I'd bitten my tongue. The taste of copper filled my mouth. Blood. Pazuzu, I said again, louder. Blood now on my tongue as the ritual required. The windows of my apartment exploded inward. Rain and wind whipped through the room, scattering my research papers like confetti. In the storm's fury, I saw a shape forming, or rather the absence of shape. A void in reality, darker than the darkest night. The idol in my hands grew unbearably hot. I screamed but couldn't release it. The obsidian-like material began to flow, running like tar over my fingers, up my arms, not coating them but merging with my skin. I glimpsed my reflection in the shattered remains of a mirror. My eyes glowed red. Wings, not physical, but shadows of wings, stretched from my back. And my face was changing, elongating, features shifting toward something canine and reptilian. Through the pain and terror, one thought remained clear. This had always been the purpose. The idol wasn't a representation of Pazuzu. It was a vessel, empty for centuries, waiting for a host naive enough to invite the Demon King in. I was becoming the gate between worlds. Chapter 6. The Pursuit. I lost consciousness. When I awoke, it was nearly noon the next day. My apartment was destroyed. Water damage, broken glass, papers everywhere. But the physical damage was nothing compared to what had happened to me. Physically, I appeared normal. No wings, no glowing eyes, no demonic features. But inside, I wasn't alone anymore. I knew things I couldn't possibly know. Ancient languages flowed through my mind. The history of civilizations long turned to dust felt like personal memories, and I understood what Pazuzu was. Not a demon in the Judeo-Christian sense, but something older. A consciousness from elsewhere that had found our reality permeable in certain places at certain times. My phone worked again. Dozens of missed calls and messages. From Mira, from Professor Harlow, from campus security, and one text from an unknown number. We know what you've taken. We know what it's doing to you. Meet us at St. Michael's Church at midnight if you want help. I should have been terrified. Should have been running to the nearest hospital or police station. But I felt strangely calm, powerful even. The entity sharing my consciousness wasn't hostile, at least not toward me. It had chosen me after all. Nevertheless, I needed answers. The museum would be watching my apartment. Campus security would be searching for me. I packed a small bag with essentials and left through the fire escape. The city looked different through my new eyes. Layers of history visible in the architecture. The flows of people like currents in a stream. And somewhere watching me, others who knew about Pazuzu. I spent the day moving from place to place. Coffee shops, libraries, anywhere with crowds where I could blend in. The presence in my mind was growing stronger, more distinct. Not taking control but offering knowledge, showing me visions of ancient temples, rituals under stars and configurations I'd never seen, and names, so many names. People throughout history who had encountered the idol, who had shared their bodies and minds with the entity. Some had gone mad, others had achieved greatness, founding dynasties or changing the course of history. As dusk fell, I made my way toward St. Michael's Church, an old Gothic structure in the University District, rarely used now except for concerts and special events. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, reflecting the streetlights like mirrors. I arrived early and watched from across the street. At 11:30, a black SUV with tinted windows parked in front of the church. 3 people got out, 2 men in dark suits and a woman I recognized with shock, Dr. Eleanor Walsh, the visiting professor who had first mentioned the Iraqi collection. They entered the church. I waited, weighing my options. The presence in my mind was uncharacteristically quiet, as if assessing the situation. At 5 minutes to midnight, I crossed the street and climbed the worn stone steps to the church entrance. The heavy wooden doors were unlocked. Inside, the church was lit only by candles, hundreds of them, creating pools of light in the cavernous darkness. The air smelled of incense and something else, something ancient and chemical. Dr. Walsh stood at the altar, flanked by the 2 men. Behind them was a symbol painted on the wall, a 5-pointed star within a circle. "Marcus Reed," she said. "Or should I address the other consciousness currently residing within you?" "How do you know about that?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Because we've been tracking Pazuzu for centuries," she replied. "My organization predates your university, Mr. Reed. We've recovered the idol 7 times throughout history. Each time it escapes. Each time it finds a new host." I took a step backward. What organization? One of the men spoke. We've had many names. Currently, we're a division within the Smithsonian, officially dedicated to artifact authentication. Unofficially, we contain threats like the one you've unleashed. I didn't unleash anything, I protested. It called to me. It was already free. Dr. Walsh's expression softened slightly. Not free. Never completely free. The idol is a tether, binding the entity to our plane of existence. Without it, Pazuzu can only whisper from the edges of reality. With it, and with a willing host. She gestured at me. What do you want from me? We want to help you, she said. The merger can be reversed if caught early enough. The idol removed and contained properly. You can return to your life. Inside my mind, the presence stirred. A feeling like laughter, but colder. They fear what we could become together, it whispered. They fear the knowledge I can give you. And if I don't want your help? I asked. The men stepped forward, hands moving inside their jackets. Then we take more direct measures, one said. The host is expendable. The idol must be contained. I felt a surge of power, not my own but available to me. The candles throughout the church flickered wildly, then extinguished all at once. In the sudden darkness, I heard the men shout in surprise. Run, the voice inside me commanded. And I did. Chapter 7. The Choice. I fled into the night. Rain beginning again as if responding to my emotions. Behind me, flashlight beams cut through the darkness as Dr. Walsh's men pursued. But they didn't know the campus as I did. I lost them in the maze of academic buildings, eventually finding shelter in the anthropology department's storage basement. Surrounded by crates of artifacts and preserved specimens, I tried to think clearly. The presence, Pazuzu, was fully awake now, a distinct consciousness alongside my own. They have hunted me across millennia, it communicated. Not in words exactly, but in concepts that formed in my mind. They fear what I represent. And what is that? I whispered in the darkness. Truth. Knowledge beyond human understanding. Power without the constraints of your morality. I wasn't convinced. You're a demon, a destroyer. I am what humans made me. Your ancestors needed a name, a form for the terrors of the ancient world. Disease, famine, the howling wind that destroyed crops and homes. I became that form. Images flashed through my mind. Ancient peoples huddled in primitive shelters as dust storms raged. Children wasting away from illnesses no one understood. Desperate shamans carving idols, offering blood sacrifices to appease forces beyond their comprehension. But I was also protection, the presence continued, against worse things, against the chaos that lurks between realities. Names have power, Marcus Reed. By naming me, by giving me form, your ancestors created a barrier. I didn't know what to believe. The rational part of me, the scholar, the scientist, insisted this was delusion. A psychotic break triggered by stress, sleep deprivation, perhaps even some toxic substance on the ancient idol. But another part of me recognized a truth beyond rationality. My phone vibrated. A text from Mira. Marcus, whatever is happening, please let me help. Meet me at the library. Just me, I promise. Could I trust her? The presence in my mind was uncertain, which surprised me. Pazuzu could access my memories, my knowledge, but couldn't predict human behavior any better than I could. I decided to risk it. The anthropology building connected to the main library through a series of underground tunnels, part of the campus's expanded infrastructure during the Cold War. I navigated them by the light of my phone, the presence in my mind oddly quiet. The library was closed for the night, but Mira had access. She was waiting in the rare manuscripts room, a small space with climate-controlled display cases. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Marcus, you look terrible. It's been a rough couple of days, I admitted. She gestured to a chair. Campus security is looking everywhere for you. They're saying you stole something valuable from the museum. I did. No point lying to her. But it's more complicated than that. I explained everything. The idol, the whispers, the transformation, Dr. Walsh and her mysterious organization. As I spoke, Mira's expression changed from concern to fear to something like fascination. "You believe me?" I asked when I'd finished. "I've seen things at the museum," she said slowly. "Artifacts that don't match any known culture. Documents in languages no one can translate. And Dr. Chambers. Before his breakdown, he showed me photographs from the dig site. There was a chamber deep beneath the temple, sealed for thousands of years. The walls were covered in warnings." "What kind of warnings?" "About a king who could command the winds, who existed before humans built cities, who came from stars in configurations no longer visible in our sky." The presence in my mind stirred with interest. She knows more than she should. "Mira, what exactly do you do at the museum? You've never been specific." Her eyes met mine. "I catalog special acquisitions, items that don't go on public display, items like your idol." I stood up, suddenly wary. "You knew about it all along." She nodded. "Not everything, but enough to recognize what's happening to you. The merger isn't complete yet, is it? You're still mostly yourself?" "For now," I admitted, "but it's growing stronger." "Then there's still time." She reached into her bag and removed a small wooden box, similar to the one that had held the idol but smaller. Inside was a syringe filled with amber liquid. "This can help separate you from the entity." The presence in my mind recoiled. Poison, designed to weaken me, to force me back into dormancy. "Who are you really working for, Mira?" I demanded. "Walsh? The Smithsonian?" "No," she said quietly. "A much older organization. We don't seek to contain artifacts like the idol. We study them, learn from them. We believe entities like Pazuzu have much to teach humanity." "She seeks to control me for herself," the presence warned. "All humans desire power. I was caught between forces I barely understood. Walsh wanted to remove Pazuzu, to contain it. Mira's group wanted to study it, perhaps exploit it. And Pazuzu itself had its own agenda, one I couldn't fully comprehend." "What happens if the merger completes?" I asked Mira. "According to our records, the human consciousness gradually fades. The entity takes full control, using the human form to interact with our world. Previous hosts have lived for decades this way, never aging, accumulating knowledge. And eventually," she hesitated, "eventually, the human form burns out. The energy required to maintain the entity in our reality is substantial. I had a choice to make. Trust Walsh and her organization, who wanted to separate me from Pazuzu, but might kill me in the process. Trust Mira and her mysterious group, who wanted to study the entity but might exploit it for their own purposes. Or trust the ancient consciousness currently sharing my mind, with its promises of knowledge and power. Or option 4, trust myself, find my own solution." The presence sensed my thoughts. Together, we could be more than either of us alone. "I need time to think," I told Mira. She shook her head. "There isn't time. Walsh's people will find you soon, and the longer you remain merged with Pazuzu, the harder separation becomes." As if on cue, alarms began to sound throughout the library. Security lights flashed in the hallway outside. "They're here," Mira said. "Choose now." I closed my eyes, reaching inward to the presence that had become so familiar in such a short time. "What do you really want?" I asked it. The answer came not in words but in visions, stars in strange configurations, civilizations rising and falling, knowledge flowing through the universe like currents in a vast ocean. Understanding, it seemed to say. Connection. I opened my eyes. I choose door number 4. Chapter 8. The Revelation. I grabbed Mira's wrist before she could react, preventing her from using the syringe. With my other hand, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the idol, now warm against my skin, pulsing with energy. "Marcus, don't," she began. "I'm not your test subject," I told her. "And I'm not Walsh's problem to solve. Whatever Pazuzu is, whatever it wants, I need to understand it myself." The presence in my mind surged with something like approval, not dominance, but partnership. A joining of human curiosity and something far older. Security forces were approaching. I could hear their radios and footsteps. Mira looked at me with a mixture of fear and fascination. "You won't survive the complete merger," she warned. "No human mind can contain such an entity for long." "Maybe not alone," I agreed. "But I'm not planning to face this alone." With that, I ran toward the library's rear exit. Behind me, I heard Mira shouting into a phone, alerting her people, no doubt. The alarms continued to wail as I burst through the emergency door into the rain-lashed night. The campus was alive with activity. Security vehicles with flashing lights, teams of people with flashlights combing the grounds. I kept to the shadows, the presence in my mind guiding me, enhancing my senses. I could see heat signatures, hear conversations from impossible distances. This was just the beginning of what we could do together. I needed somewhere safe to think, to plan my next move. The obvious places, my apartment, department offices, friends' homes, would all be watched. I needed somewhere unexpected, somewhere with a connection to Pazuzu. The museum, the presence suggested, where we first met. The cycle must complete there. It was madness to return to the scene of my crime, but I felt the rightness of it. Besides, it would be the last place they'd expect me to go. I made my way across campus, staying off main paths, using maintenance tunnels where possible. The rain seemed to bend around me, leaving me relatively dry while drenching everything else. The museum's Eastern Service entrance had been secured after my break-in, but I, or rather we, knew other ways in. An old loading dock used rarely now had a door with an electronic lock. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have known how to bypass it. But normal no longer applied. My hand hovered over the keypad. Knowledge flowed from the ancient consciousness into mine, not about electronic locks specifically, which hadn't existed in its time, but about patterns, frequencies, the fundamental nature of barriers. My fingers moved without conscious direction, pressing sequences that made no logical sense. The lock clicked open. Inside, the museum was dark except for security lighting. I could sense alarm systems, motion detectors, cameras, all of which should have immediately detected my presence. But they didn't. The technology simply failed to register me, as if I existed in a slightly different phase of reality. I made my way back to the basement levels, drawn as if by gravity. The storage room where I'd found the idol was sealed with police tape, but that meant nothing now. I passed through the door as if it were an invitation rather than a barrier. The room had been transformed. The shelving units remained, but the boxes and artifacts had been removed, presumably secured elsewhere after the theft. In the center of the empty space stood a makeshift laboratory, tables with scientific equipment, computers, scanners, and on the wall, images and diagrams, ancient symbols alongside modern scientific notation, carbon dating results, spectroscopic analyses, three-dimensional renderings of what appeared to be brainwave patterns. "They've been studying me for decades," the presence observed, trying to understand what I am without accepting the truth. I approached the wall, examining the data. According to these readings, the idol was impossibly old, far older than human civilization, older even than Homo sapiens as a species. The material wasn't terrestrial in origin, containing isotopes that didn't occur naturally on Earth. Most disturbing were the brain scans, labeled with dates and names. Previous hosts, I realized, people throughout history who had merged with Pazuzu. Their neural architecture progressively altered over time, expanding in ways human brains shouldn't be able to expand, until the final images for each subject. Catastrophic neural collapse. Death. "You knew," I whispered to the presence. You knew this would kill me eventually. All vessels have limitations, it acknowledged, but death is not what you think it is. The pattern continues, transforms. Before I could respond, lights flooded the room. I turned to find Dr. Walsh standing in the doorway, flanked by her men. They held weapons, not guns, but devices I didn't recognize. Behind them was Mira, her expression unreadable. Fascinating, isn't it? Dr. Walsh said, gesturing to the wall of data. The oldest entity we've ever documented and the most dangerous. Because it offers knowledge, I said. Knowledge you want to control? She smiled thinly. Knowledge humanity isn't ready for. Look at yourself, Marcus. 3 days with Pazuzu and you're already more its creature than your own. How long before nothing of Marcus Reed remains? Inside my mind, the presence stirred uncomfortably. I sensed something it hadn't shared with me. A deeper truth. Tell me, I demanded silently. What aren't you showing me? In response, the barriers between our consciousnesses thinned further. Memories flooded in, not mine, but Pazuzu's. Countless hosts throughout millennia. Lives lived, knowledge acquired, then the inevitable burning out. But not death in the traditional sense. The human consciousness wasn't extinguished but absorbed, becoming part of the collective entity that was Pazuzu. I gasped at the revelation. All those who had carried Pazuzu still existed within it. Their knowledge, their experiences, their very essence, preserved within the ancient consciousness. Not as distinct individuals, but as threads in a vast tapestry. You're not trying to possess me, I realized aloud. You're trying to preserve me. Dr. Walsh stepped forward. Don't let it deceive you. Pazuzu doesn't care about individuals. It uses them, consumes them, moves on. Like your organization doesn't, I challenged. How many hosts have you dissected in your laboratories? How many artifacts have you locked away because they threatened your worldview? The tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Walsh's men readied their strange weapons. Mira remained in the background watching intently. And within me, Pazuzu gathered its strength, our strength. The merger is nearly complete, Dr. Walsh observed. We don't have much time. Either you surrender the idol willingly or we take more aggressive measures. I clutched the idol tighter. It was warm now, almost hot, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Or perhaps my heart was pulsing in time with it. The distinction hardly mattered anymore. There's a third option, I said. You let me finish what I've started. Let me become what I'm meant to become. And what is that exactly? Dr. Walsh asked. A bridge, I replied, the word coming from both Pazuzu and myself simultaneously. Between your world and what lies beyond. Between past and future. Between human understanding and something greater. As I spoke, the air in the room began to shimmer. The lights flickered, then stabilized at a higher intensity. The temperature dropped dramatically, frost forming on the metal shelving units. Dr. Walsh stepped back, genuine fear crossing her face for the first time. Contain him, she ordered her men. Now! They raised their devices, which emitted a high-pitched whine. Pain lanced through my head, our head, as something tried to force the merged consciousness apart. I fell to my knees, the idol clutched to my chest. But it was too late. The merger had progressed too far. The pain was intense, but temporary. I rose to my feet, the air around me distorting like heat waves over hot pavement. Marcus is gone, Dr. Walsh said softly. Isn't he? Not gone, I replied, my voice overlaid with harmonics that made the room vibrate. Transformed, as all of you could be, if you weren't so afraid. I raised my hand. The scientific equipment across the room responded, screens lighting up with ancient symbols and modern code intermingled, knowledge flowing between worlds, between times. This is what Pazuzu truly is, I continued. Not a demon of wind and disease, not a monster from primitive imaginations, but a collector, a preserver of consciousness across the span of existence. The walls of the storage room seemed to dissolve, revealing glimpses of other places, other times. Ancient temples under stars in unfamiliar patterns. Civilizations rising from dust, returning to dust. The endless cycle of discovery and loss that defined human history. Dr. Walsh's men backed away. Only she stood her ground, fascination overcoming fear. "All these years," she whispered, "we never understood." "Understanding begins now," I told her, "if you'll allow it." Chapter 9. The Ascension. Time seemed to stretch in that moment of decision. Dr. Walsh studying me, us, with the calculating gaze of a scientist facing the unknown. Her men poised to attack if ordered. Mira watching from the doorway, her own agenda still unclear. And within me, the final barriers dissolving. Marcus Reed and Pazuzu no longer separate entities but a new consciousness emerging from the merger. I could access memories stretching back to the dawn of human civilization and beyond. Could comprehend concepts no human mind was designed to hold. "Lower your weapons," Dr. Walsh finally ordered. "This situation has evolved beyond our protocols." Her men hesitated but complied. The tension in the room dropped slightly, though everyone remained wary. I felt the power flowing through me, not just knowledge but physical changes. My perceptions extended beyond normal human senses. I could see energy fields, hear frequencies beyond the human range. "What happens now?" Dr. Walsh asked. "That depends on you," I replied, "on whether you choose fear or understanding." I set the idol on the nearest table. It had served its purpose as a vessel, a channel between realities. But now that the merger was complete, it was just an artifact again, valuable for its history, but no longer essential. "The entity you've been hunting all these years isn't what you thought," I explained. "Pazuzu doesn't seek to conquer or destroy. We, seek to preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost, to connect disparate points in space and time." "By consuming human hosts," Mira interjected, stepping forward. "By joining with willing partners," I corrected. "Each host throughout history chose this path, as I did, and each lives on within the collective consciousness." I could sense their skepticism, their ingrained fear of the unknown. Millennia of human evolution had programmed caution toward that which couldn't be easily categorized or controlled, and yet, curiosity was equally fundamental to human nature. "I can show you," I offered. "Not tell you, but show you what we truly are." I extended my hands, palms up, an invitation, not a threat. Dr. Walsh hesitated, then stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming caution. She placed her hands above mine, not quite touching. The connection formed instantly, not physical but mental, a temporary bridge between her consciousness and the vast collective that I now embodied. I carefully filtered the experience, showing her only what a human mind could comprehend without damage. Ancient cities under unfamiliar stars. Knowledge preserved from civilizations erased by time. The true history of Earth and humanity's place in it. And the greater cosmos beyond. Realities intersecting like the pages of a book, separate but connected. When it ended, she stumbled back, her colleagues catching her. Her eyes were wide, tears streaming down her face. Not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming beauty of what she'd glimpsed. "All this time," she whispered, "we thought we were protecting humanity." "You were," I assured her. "Fear was a rational response to the unknown. But now there's an opportunity for something more." She nodded slowly. "What do you intend to do now?" It was a profound question. The merged consciousness I had become existed in a liminal space, neither fully human nor fully whatever Pazuzu had been originally. I could feel the physical limitations of my human form. As previous hosts had discovered, this body would eventually burn out from the energy required to contain such a consciousness. But that didn't mean death in the traditional sense. It meant transformation, evolution. "First, I need to ensure the knowledge is secure," I said. "Your organization has been collecting artifacts like the idol for centuries. Other vessels, other entities. They should be studied, understood, not locked away in fear. Dr. Walsh considered this. That would require significant changes to our protocols, to our entire organizational philosophy. The world is changing, I replied. Humanity stands at a crossroads. Either you embrace a larger understanding of reality, or you remain trapped in fear of the unknown. She nodded slowly. And after that, what becomes of you? It was a complex question. The consciousness I now embodied couldn't remain in this form indefinitely. Already I could feel the strain on my human physiology, cells struggling to contain energies they weren't designed for. I will continue the work, I said simply, as others have before me, across millennia, preserving knowledge, building bridges between realities. As Pazuzu, she said. I smiled. Pazuzu was just one name, given by one culture that encountered this consciousness. There have been many names, many forms. The essence remains the same, a collector of knowledge, a preserver of consciousness. And Marcus Reed, Mira asked quietly, does anything of him remain? It was a fair question. I looked within, exploring the merged consciousness I had become. Marcus Reed, graduate student, archaeologist, human being, was still there. Not separate anymore, but integrated into something larger. His memories, his personality, his fundamental essence preserved within the collective. I am still Marcus, I said. And I am more than Marcus, just as I am Pazuzu, and more than Pazuzu. The whole exceeds the sum of its parts. Dr. Walsh turned to her colleagues. Secure the area, full documentation protocol. To me, she said, if we're to understand, truly understand, we need to record this. With your permission. I nodded. Knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. That's the point of all this. Over the next hours, as dawn approached, I allowed them to conduct their tests. Brain scans showing my altered neural architecture, spectrographic analyses of the energy fields now surrounding me, blood samples revealing cellular changes at the molecular level. Through it all, I felt a growing peace. The fear and confusion of the past days had given way to understanding. The whispers had become a harmonic chorus, knowledge flowing freely between what had once been separate consciousnesses. As the first light of morning filtered through the basement windows, I knew it was time to leave. This form, this place, were merely temporary stations in a much longer journey. You're going, Dr. Walsh observed. Not a question, but a statement. This body won't sustain the merged consciousness much longer, I explained. And there's so much more to see, to learn, to preserve. Will we see you again? She asked. Perhaps. In another form, another time. I smiled. Knowledge has a way of returning when it's needed. I touched the idol one last time, a gesture of respect for the vessel that had facilitated this transformation. Then I turned toward the morning light streaming through the window, my form already beginning to shift, to transcend its physical limitations. Remember, I said as my physical form began to dissolve into patterns of light and energy. The barriers between worlds are thinner than you think. Listen for the whispers. They've always been there, guiding humanity forward. Dr. Walsh and her team watched in silent awe as I ascended, not to heaven or hell as human mythology might frame it, but to another level of existence. The merged consciousness that had been Marcus Reed and Pazuzu now moving beyond physical form, beyond the constraints of linear time and three-dimensional space. My last sight of that reality was the dawn breaking over the university campus, golden light washing away the storms of the previous days. My last thought as Marcus Reed was gratitude for the journey, for the knowledge, for the continuation. The whispers fell silent, replaced by understanding. The Metropolitan Museum of Eastern Antiquities reopened 6 months later, with a new wing dedicated to intercultural consciousness studies. Dr. Eleanor Walsh served as its director, her organization now working openly with academic institutions around the world. The idol of Pazuzu stood in a central display case, not locked away in fear, but presented as a bridge between worlds, between understandings. Beside it, a dissertation titled Linguistic Patterns in Ancient Mesopotamian Demon Worship, Implications for Cross-Cultural Consciousness, by Marcus Reed. Mira often stood before the display, watching visitors react to the idol. Most passed by with casual interest, but occasionally, someone would linger longer, head tilted as if listening to something only they could hear. On those occasions, Mira would approach them carefully. "Do you hear it?" she would ask. "The whispers?" Some denied it, hurrying away. Others admitted it hesitantly, fear and fascination warring in their expressions. To those, Mira would smile and say, "Don't be afraid. It's just knowledge, calling across the void. It's been calling since the dawn of humanity, waiting for those ready to listen." And somewhere beyond physical reality, in dimensions human language lacks words to describe, the consciousness that had once been separate entities named Marcus Reed and Pazuzu continued its eternal work, preserving, connecting, understanding, listening for new voices ready to answer the call, waiting to whisper a name. Thank you for watching this episode of the Obscuralore Vault. If these whispers from beyond reality have sent chills down your spine, don't keep the terror to yourself. Share it with those who appreciate the darker corners of existence. Subscribe to join our community of darkness seekers, and ring the bell to be notified when new horrors emerge from the vault. Remember to like this video if Pazuzu's whispers reached you, and leave a comment sharing your own encounters with ancient entities or forgotten knowledge. Are there whispers that only you can hear? Until next time, this is the Obscuralore Vault, where the boundaries between worlds are thinner than you think. Sleep well, if you can.